What are the determinants of working capital? In this session, we will see what are the determinants of working capital. So the main ones are production cycle. That is, it considers time from procurement of raw materials are made to completion of manufacturing process. Next is raw materials, where we actually discuss boom conditions versus decline in activity. There is business cycle where the dependence is on tax liability. There is dividend policy where dividends or retained profits, an option or choice is there. So what increases the working capital management aspects is also discussed in this. And finally, it is depreciation policy. So we will take a look at each of them and see what are the determinants of working capital management. So to start with, a firm should have neither too much nor too little working capital, and hence it should plan the working capital. While planning the working capital, the following are the determinants of working capital that affects different enterprises differently. This we have already defined. Hence, these determinants of working capital are involved so that a proper assessment be done on the quantum of working capital required. So to start with, the first determinant is production cycle. Production cycle mentions time involved in the manufacture of goods. It covers the time from procurement of raw materials to the completion of manufacturing process, leading to production of finished goods. In order to sustain this, working capital is needed. The larger the time span of this production cycle, larger will be the need for working capital. Production cycle should be chosen in such a way that the time span of manufacturing process be done within a stipulated time interval. Once such a manufacturing process is selected, steps should be taken in such a manner that the production cycle is completed within that time span. Appropriate policies also make sure the terms of credit of raw materials and other supplies reduces the working capital requirements. So this is when we consider working capital from the perspective of time from when the procurement of raw materials are done to the completion of manufacturing process. Next one is raw materials, where we actually discuss boom conditions versus decline in activity. So business fluctuations lead to cyclic changes or seasonal variations, causing a shift in working capital position. The variations are felt in an upward phase where a boom condition prevails, and lower phase where economic activities are marked by a decline in activities undertaken. During upward phase, working capital requirements grow, whereas in downward phase, the working capital requirement decreases. So the working capital goes up when there is a boom condition, and when there is a decline in activity, working capital comes down. The next one is business cycle. So there is some dependence on tax liability. So if tax liability increases, it paves way for increments in working capital requirement and vice versa. That is, when tax liability decreases, there's a decrement in working capital requirement. Hence, an adequate provision for tax payment is an important factor in the determination of working capital management. Next one is dividend policy. An appropriate dividend policy determines whether to retain funds in the business or distribute dividends to its shareholders. So when profits are lower, there's a choice a firm is placed with to distribute dividends or to retain profits. Sometimes this may entail payment of bonus shares, which enables payment of dividends without draining cash resources. Hence, dividend policy is a significant factor in determining levels of working capital in an organization, where there exists a choice between distribution of dividends or retaining of cash resources. And finally, it is depreciation policy. Depreciation of fixed assets affect tax liability and retention of profits. Depreciation is permitted expenditure in the calculation of net profits. Enhancing depreciation means there's a profit of the firm that is affected, lowering tax liability and more cash profits. Higher depreciation would also mean lower amounts of profits and a small dividend payment in effect. There is also special mention of selection of depreciation method, which has further financial implications. If current expenditure falls short of depreciation provision, the working capital position stabilizes, hence there may not be required any short-term borrowings. On the other hand, if current capital expenditure goes more than the depreciation provision, dividend payment along with retention of profit adopted, preventing working capital position from being affected in a negative way. Hence, depreciation policy is most important while determining working capital needs of a firm. So this concludes the determinants of working capital. Thank you.